Method. Students will demonstrate the ability to draw a flower using the enlargement grid method, then add color using an art material of their choice. You're going to see on my video demonstration that the RGB color from my computer screen may differ from my final watercolor painting. Enjoy! Good morning. This is Madame McCree. This is my demo video on our art lesson, Flower Enlargement, using a drawing medium, painting medium, crayons, colored pencils, or gel pens. Let me demonstrate. What I have here are different materials you could use if you have it at home. What I have here are my tube watercolor paints. You don't have to use watercolor tubes. You could have watercolors in a palette you may get from the dollar store. If you have pastels at home, you can use dry pastels or oil pastels. Oil pastels gives a bright, bold color. Also, you want to be careful not to get this on your clothing. You can also use, if you have crayons out at home, if you want to add color to your flower design, you can use crayons, you can use your gel pens, you can use your colored pencils. You will also need a drawing pencil or regular number 2 writing pencil. If you want to use watercolors, you don't have to use watercolor paints. It's good to have a few brushes. Sometimes brushes come with your watercolor palettes. An eraser, or just the eraser from your pencil. For my demonstration, I'm going to use a palette where I can squeeze on the paints. A glass of water for mixing. It's good to have some napkins or paper towels. Now, what we're going to do is demonstrate how to use the enlargement grid method. I might have already shown this to you during the first 3 quarters of school. So you take a picture. If you have a printer, or if you don't have a printer to print out my handout, you can go outside if you have flowers already showing, or you have technology available. You could do a search, Google search of flower images. In my keynote presentation that I will have attached to my demonstration, video demonstration, you can research and you can look at the styles of Georgia O'Keeffe, Picasso, and even Henri Matisse. This flower design I printed out in black and white. I took a picture of it. I don't know if you can see it on my computer, but this is a pink impatient flower. And I went out grocery shopping and I bought this flower plant. It had these beautiful impatient flower designs. It's fuchsia pink. It has some yellow centerpiece, and there's some greenery around it. So let me quickly demonstrate the grid method. Here's also a little card that I had in my files of what an artist had done as far as a watercolor painting design. You might want to reference your color wheel. This is a painting I did over the summer, last summer, a flower design when I went to Massachusetts. So this is using watercolor paints. Okay, let me begin. Also, you can use whatever paper you have at home. You can use notebook paper, you can use plain copying paper. What I have here is my own smooth cold press watercolor paper. It's 9 by 12. A plain copier paper is 8.5 by 11 inches. You could draw, you can color, you can paint on newspapers. You can also use the inside bag of a paper bag, brown paper bag. Any materials you have at home is fine. Okay, one other thing you will need is some practice paper, some scraps you have at home. You might want to practice mixing your colors. Okay, so what I've done was divided my watercolor paper into four spaces, and I used my ruler. It's good to have a straight edge or ruler handy, and I just outlined it, my folds, with the ruler so you can see it. Also here again with this thinner paper, all you have to do is fold the paper in half, and then in half lengthwise and crossways. So I'm not going to use the paper, the Xerox paper. I'm going to use my watercolor paper. I'm going to use my printout, and I'm going to demonstrate how to quickly draw an enlargement of this flower. This is a quick, easy way of drawing. If you don't know how to draw, you're afraid to draw by sight. So what you do, you sight like a puzzle. You could draw whatever that's in each section or each grid, and understand the angles and where this line intersects this line. So you're using math. You're integrating math with art. So I'm going to quickly do a sketch, and I'm sighting lines. I'm sighting where the center is that comes here. I'm just establishing the shading and the outline. Just a quick linear, free-spirited contour line. See, I'm going into this space here, this grid. I'm coming back this way. I'm going to draw it lightly, and then I'm going to go back on the lines in case you can't see it. So you draw light. Keep your pencil moving, continuous line drawing. And I'm going to sight this space right here. You're connecting lines, looking up, and quickly drawing the outline. Of course, you don't have to draw everything. I'm going to draw this leaf. Here, the leaf here, edge touch the grid line. So basically that's it. So let me just darken my line so you can see it better. Don't worry about too much erasing and making it look perfect. Just be creative, be spontaneous. When I'm going to use the watercolor paints, you want to keep it fresh, keep it spontaneous, keep the water flowing, paints flowing. And so here's a leaf over here. This is an original. It's always good to learn how to draw from your own photos. Or if you go outside, draw directly from nature. So that's how basically you draw an enlargement, or draw directly from a photo capture. Now, what I'm going to do is demonstrate. Let's set this aside. Of course, you have the option of leaving your flower black and white, but it's always beautiful to use color to capture your flower, to make it stand out. So this is a fuchsia pink. So what I'm going to do is wet my brush. There's different types of brushes you can use. You can do a pointed soft sable brush, or you can use a flat angular brush. Here's another flat brush here. This is what you call a fan brush. This is not necessary, but you basically use this to soften the edges, mainly used for clouds, and also if you ever do a portrait, softer blending. So there's a couple of methods you can use for applying watercolor paints. You could wet the paper first, wet the surface, which is called wet. On wet application, you're wetting the paper and using wet watercolors paint. And there's also a dry application. Just put the paint directly on a dry surface. So right here I wet the paper first on one section of the flower. So what I have here, I have white watercolor paint. There's a darker, what you call alizarin crimson, a richer red, and this is a regular medium red. So from my understanding from the students, they tell me, and I've watched them, they probably know more than I do as far as color mixing. To make paint, you add white to the red. So that's what I'm doing. And with this angular brush, flat brush, you can get into tight corners. Now you do want to leave some of the flower petals white. You want to leave some areas white and keep it fresh, keep it going, keep moving. Some areas, don't forget to use the elements of art, which is line. We did line, the shape of the flower. You're going to create form, make the flower look three-dimensional. Value, understand the lights and darks where the sun was hitting on the flower, leaving some of the white of the paper. Texture, you might want to get into some of the roughness, darker shading also of the flower. So you could play your music while you're painting. You could have the TV on. You could just put yourself into being creative and paint. So you're going to have lights and dark areas. Right in here is a little dark area. Now, it wouldn't hurt to add some blue to make your pink look violet-like. So blue and red makes violet. And that's good for also the dark areas, the shadows. I see I have a shadow here, and if you think your paint gets too thick in areas, just water it down. There's shadow in here. You can also take your paper towel and blot it up, see? Any excess paint. So you keep wetting the brush, and what you want to have is some overlapping layers, transparent layers of paint. You don't want to make it too thick, the paint application too thick. You don't want to do that, especially if you're using watercolors. So I'm trying to work quick, spontaneous, and trying to keep it going. So let me get some of this in here. Now, if your application of paint becomes too dark, too thick, you can always water it down. You can always water it down with, I'm not going to put too much of these shadows that came from the plant hanger. So it's okay to show some of the bluish violet. And you can also keep your brush clean. If you think it's getting too muddy, change your water. Now, applying this first quick application of paint, you might think, oh, it doesn't look good. So with watercolors, you can always go back and add a second layer of paints. You can also use whatever you have left on the brush to create darks and lights. While the paint is still wet, you can blend out hard edges. You have to practice. You have to practice, and you'll find that the paint just flows just like you like. You can always go back in and add darks. I'm not going to use black. I don't believe in using black paint because that tends to drain out and draw the bright colors out. It tends to deaden the other colors. So you want to use a mixture of the complementary color. For example, if you're using red, add green. To your primary color. Now, as far as the technique, pulling out the highlights, let me just go back in here. Sometimes you might not think it's bright enough, it's deep enough in color, rich enough in color. Like I said, you can always go back. And while the paint is still wet, go back and darken any areas. And make corrections. See how that paint is beginning to show texture and bleeding into the damp paint. And you can also create a brush technique of texture, dry brush technique. See some of this highlight in here. You all can also take a wet brush, take your paper towel and pull up the highlights. So you can show the lines, the outline of your drawing. You can use the edge of your brush to pull in textures. Here, this over here is a little dark, so it's like a cast shadow of a leaf. So now in here is, I'm just going to quickly still use my blue, combination of blue, and in here it's real dark underneath the flowers. So you can keep it fresh and spontaneous like that. It's okay to use now for the leaf. You can use green, you can add some yellow. Oh, I have yellow here. See how you just keep it going, keep it fresh. And there's a leaf over here. You can also bring some of that green. Now, almost finished. Right in here, I see yellow. And I'm going to leave the tip